Okay, so I'm Dr. Krista Ollie Hopkins, psychologist at Balance and Birch. I work with neurodivergent people, chronically ill people, people with trauma, people going through major life transitions, and therefore I end up working a lot with grief. So that combined with the fact that I've been experiencing grief from a very young age, in a different form than I think people traditionally view grief, I've become very interested in working with grief, understanding grief, and hearing about other people's experiences with it, and like what it means to them. So for April's podcast, I just wanted to invite everyone in the practice who wanted to come on and either share about their personal experiences with grief, um, if they have like in the work that they've done with like clients or patients, if they want to share about how grief shows up in them and subsequently shows up in the areas that like they're working in, like in the body or things like that. Or if you have seen loved ones go through grief and you want to share about that. Definitely only share as much as you feel comfortable with. I don't expect you to share every single detail of your life, but you're also welcome to. Like I was telling Gina and David earlier, Dee, that I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve and like I'll just share what's ever in my mind and I'll just start crying. So like that's definitely welcome, but also not expected. Um, so yeah, I mean, whoever would like to start.
So for starting, do we talk about a time that was like super challenging for us? And then we go from there? Because I can start.
Sorry. Yeah, you can. So I guess that's one of the, I'm leaving it broad because like grief can be like physical loss. It can be like a really challenging time in your life where a big change happened because grief definitely shows up there. It
Hmm.
can be like losing relationships, even if the person is still alive, but the relationship ended, losing pets, having to move from one place to another and grieving that. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean the hardest, and this is like I don't know if this says a lot about me or not. Maybe I'm a a little self-centered, I guess. But the hardest thing I ever had to deal with in my life, when I was like 10 or 11, I would always watch military movies with my dad. And I became obsessed with them. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be the best that the military has to offer. And literally from like 11 and 12, I trained almost every day from that point on to like be the most athletic specimen I could ever try and become. I was running and lifting and I did really well. I was in really good shape. Um, and I mean, you fast forward 8 years, Dave gets to his first selection course, and I failed. And at that point, I was like, wow, that wait a second, this is my whole life. Every day, every second, what was motivating me? Why would I do all these workouts? Well, because I wanted this. Well, now I don't get that. um, and I think to this day, I still deal with that. I still think about it, like, "Oh, man, what if I passed that course? What if I did something differently?" And there's times where, I can doubt myself as a person. Like, "Man, like, can you really do anything you put your mind to? Like, you tried that, and you failed, and you didn't even try again." And I I think in when I because I don't really struggle with death, and I've always felt very weird about that, but I did really struggle with this. Death always kinda made sense to me. But for this, I was like, "Wait, I did everything I was supposed to do, and I didn't get what I wanted." It felt like what people went through, like, grieving. If that makes sense. I don't even know how to describe that. It was like, I don't know, like, how people feel when someone dies, I guess, but I think this is probably how they feel when someone dies. And I just had to create whole new philosophies, and that's a lot of why you get Dave here, like, where I'm, like, super smiley and happy, and I guess the offshoot of it is you refer to yourself in the 3rd person sometimes. That is the side effect to coping the way I did. But I think, the way that I overcame that, if we're segueing right into that, um, is I had to identify parts of myself that I loved that were outside of this identity that I had become so attached to. Because it was integral to me and it was gone. But I think I had to acknowledge that there were other things that were integral and they could be worked at too, and they could be loved and cherished and appreciated. And so I think it made me more open minded because, I mean, obviously I was on a one track mind. I did the same thing for like 9 years trying to do something. Um, it made me more open minded and honestly a better person because when I look at who I was, I was brutal and pugilistic and rough around the edges and kind of serious and not really fun to be around. And I won't say that if you practice discipline the way that I did, that's what happens to you. But it's what happened to me. That's, how I react in that scenario, I guess. And opening up to the fact that there's other things I can be good at. There's other things I can do with my life opened up my ability to also bring out the best parts of my personality, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And oh shoot, you said something specifically. Oh, and I think this applies to all types of grief, or at least it can. You mentioned how like things not working out the way that you had planned for them to led to you having to find other things about yourself that you really liked and loved. Um, I mean, yeah, like it sounds like you sank so much of your identity into this, and then when it didn't work out, you had to figure out like, okay, well, what do I do now? And I think that's actually very common for many types of grief. Like if we lose a person, or like I lost my dog back in September, and that was life changing for me. Like when you lose a person, an animal, an experience, access to something, and you've put so much of yourself into that area or being, I absolutely think there's a loss of identity. And that in and of itself brings tremendous grief. So not just the loss of like the opportunity or being, but also like, oh, there's this whole part of me that is gone or that I don't get to interact with in the same way. So yeah, I'm just really, really appreciative that you shared that.
Yeah, and another thing that I think is important too is like that didn't happen. That wasn't like an epiphany and now we're good. That was like a over years process of like working through everything, thinking through it. And I think if I were to, not that grieving is ever grie you don't want to judge how someone grieves necessarily, but you want to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, especially if it's something to where like you set out for a profession or an ideal and you thought something was going to be a way and you really worked towards it, you didn't get it, and that's like the thing that's the thing you're grieving. um I threw out exercise. I threw out church. You don't have to go to church. Church was good for me. I threw out relationships with my family. Why? Well, because I'm questioning everything now. And I think if I were to go through anything to make that several year grieving process a little healthier for me, is it would to be to have ahead of time. You have to decide this before you're grieving. Um, these things that matter to you and attach value to them ahead of time, anticipating the fact that we lose things, people die, life changes, and it is very hard, but we can try to make it as manageable as possible, I guess.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, yeah, I think what you're getting at is like trying to find balance within grief. which on I think of the other two episodes I've done, we talked about because I mean it looks so different every day. And like you said, like the realizations you made didn't come all at once. It comes over time and it certainly isn't linear. Um yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
So I would like to add to that. That's okay. I grieve. Sometimes I feel like I'm stoic. I don't show any emotion. And that's just come from the way I was raised. Um, but there was one day, I was in a store and I smelled a perfume. It was white diamond, I think it is. My grandmother, she used to wear that. She passed away back in 2003 or 4, I want to say. And I started crying. This happened like a few months ago. And I was like, why am I crying? I was like, that's her perfume that she used to wear. So I was like, wow, I'm still kind of, I'm grieving in a sense. And that happened years ago. Um, and my mom, that's her mother that passed away. She still actually grieves certain things she sees or what have you. She might cry about it and think about it. I'm like, wow, that happened years ago. So it's just, you can't put like a sort of a time limit on it, and it's just, it's one of those things that just happens to people. But I was shocked that that happened, to me like that. I was like, wow, I smelled her perfume and it really, really, it set me, I don't want to say it set, me back per se. It was just like as far as a memory, so to speak. But yeah, it really had, had bothered me that whole day. I was like, wow, I smelled her perfume. And it's not that I forgot about her, it's just I just didn't realize that that would continue to bother me like that. It was one little smell had did that for me. Um, so I don't like when people say, "Oh, well, they should not, be worrying about something anymore that happened in the past." And it's like what you said, like you can't really put sort of a time on it or when somebody, should be over something. Now, I feel as though maybe you can find a way to, to cope, but to just say they should, forget about it, you shouldn't be crying about certain things anymore, that's not fair. I don't think that's fair for people. But yeah, it really hit me like I was still actually thinking about it. Um, this morning, matter of fact, or because I had reached for a spray or something I was reaching for, and I was like, I can't believe that really, to trigger me. And it's like, you're human, D. It's okay. But yeah, just wanted to share that.
I definitely agree with you. And, because, like, like, even talking about it, like, 5 minutes ago, I was like, "Man, I'm kinda sad about that." Like, "Oh, what if I did do it?" You know? And I think to speak more clearly, like, now I grieve it manageably. Beforehand, it stagnated me. I was paralyzed. I was like, "I'm not gonna be able to do anything with my life. I'm a failure. It's over." And even though, I'm not gonna pretend like I don't even feel that at times. But I think it's something to where the ability to take myself out of it to where it's more manageable. I think, I think people need to not set a timeline to say, "I'm not gonna feel anything for this anymore." But I think especially with something shocking like losing a parent or, a grandparent or someone you, like, really truly loved, you know, that will stick with you 100% forever, because that person's kind of ingrained in you, in my opinion. That's kinda how I see it. Um And I, you don't want to tell somebody who's grieving their parents, you should be back on your feet in a year. But, it's also pragmatically, you can't furlough life. And that person you're grieving and love, they don't want you to furlough life. And a great expression of love to that person is like, I'm gonna, you know, build something in your memory. Like even if it's like in practice, like in some like a value they held. Like I'm just going to make sure that a business I hold has this value because I love you and I want to make sure that that lives on. You know, and I think that's healthy grieving. I don't know. Dr. Chris, is it okay to call that healthy grieving?
So I actually I try to avoid the words healthy versus unhealthy. Um just and I mean even I as a therapist, like I find myself going towards those words just because they're so commonly used, and that's like a dichotomy that is discussed a lot in society, especially with the rise of wellness culture and like orthorexia and like wellness culture that's gone a little too far. um People will label foods as healthy or unhealthy or behaviors as healthy or unhealthy. I try to focus more on like, is it serving you? So like sometimes curling in a ball, sobbing about my dog passing away is serving me. That's exactly what I need. 100% that is what I need. I need to cancel my entire day and I need to let the grief just completely crush me. And that is serving me. Some days it's not because maybe I had to cancel on my Wednesday clients last week because of one of my chronic illnesses flaring up. So this Wednesday, I've got to do something different. If with all my might, I've got to push that grief down to be able to be present for my clients because I'm a therapist. So it's not that the pushing down is even unhealthy. It's just that matter of factly, that's just what has to happen for me to get through the day and be there for the people that I'm supposed to be there for. So you're not wrong for labeling it as healthy or unhealthy. I mean, you get to choose which language you use. That's kind of why I tend to steer away from it, just because we kind of tend to associate healthy with good and unhealthy with bad. Whereas I think grief tends to be more neutral. Um, and emotions are neutral, in my opinion. Like, they don't always feel neutral, like anger or sadness don't feel neutral. But like, I don't label anger or sadness or depression as like bad or negative emotions. Sometimes I'll describe them as like unpleasant. Um, but yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it really does help because, like, especially with like, my background isn't in psychology, and so, when I start thinking about things, when I'm like healthy, unhealthy, better word is like sustainable, like or like serving you, like productive, like not even necessarily productive, because then people are gonna be like, I gotta work. What? No, like just doing what it's set out to do. And you know it's it's one of those things to where because the reason why is, every accusation is an admission of guilt. And so why do I warn people what grieving too long can be? Because I grieved way too long. I was stuck and I stagnated. And it's not that it's regret, because it's not regret. It's the acceptance that, man, I could have handled that better. And I could have picked better options that served me better. And that I think is my fear to other people, is it's like, it's not that you can't grieve for a long time. It's just that, people are capable of grieving a little bit too long, and I think I might have been one of them. And so I think people should be cautious of that, and it's a spectrum, so if somebody's uh grieving a lot on a certain day and not on other days, that's, in my opinion, that's totally normal. But I think the real focus is the like you know, how's this affecting everybody around you? How's your professional life? How are your relationships? Because if those are going in the wayside, I think there's some great questions to ask about how we're grieving, and in a loving way. Everybody's very you know quick to think that people are judging them. It's like, no, like sometimes people tell you something because they love you. um but I totally agree with you, D, that's a and and Ollie, that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Um, Gina, I promise I'll let you talk. I just wanted to summarize something David was saying. Um, it was just making me think of like that's why community is so important. Because of accountability. So like I've definitely worked with clients where like the grief has taken them to a place of a flavor of depression that is just pulling them lower and lower and lower. And just like they're sinking into a black hole and isolating. Which I encourage my clients to have days like that and time periods like that, but also I try to do honest check-ins with them around like, all right, is this the kind of thing where this is where we need to be? We need to sink into that deep dark hole, or like have we been there for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, however long, whatever length of time, and do we need to do something about it? And so with my clients, the way I handle it is just by asking them. And they tend to be able to gauge, or even if they're like, I don't know, within a few sessions, we're able to figure out, do we need to do something about this, or is this what you need? And then also, how can you reach out to either community resources or like your people, your support system to help you through this? Like sometimes just having someone physically sit next to you kind of like helps you slowly start to transition towards like, yeah, I'm still grieving, but now I can get up and shower. Or, those types of things. Like now I can make sure I'm eating, because grief can get to a point where people aren't eating. They're not doing things that they need to do to stay safe. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at, David. So yeah, I think lovingly, people coming to you lovingly and saying, hey, I'm noticing things are getting to a point where I'm worried about you. It definitely doesn't always feel good to hear that from someone, but I think it's really important. Yeah, Gina, I saw you about to unmute and then I started talking.
And in true Gina form, I have now forgotten what I was saying, and it's not your fault at all. I just, because Dee said something, and I was like, oh yeah, but I didn't want to interrupt her. And then a couple times David mentioned a few things, and I didn't want to interrupt him because it's one of my things that I do. I get like so excited, then I interrupt. So maybe I'll hit on it if I talk about when my dad passed. He passed in August of 2019, but he had dementia, frontotemporal lobe dementia. And so it was like this like long step down process of losing a person that you love. And it was, there's like with every new thing that happened, like he became aphasic, so like he couldn't speak, but he could still understand a little bit for a while, and then that one, and that's something that you agree. I was like, can't really have a conversation now with your dad now, and you can't, and with every like phase of that awful disease, which I wouldn't wish on anyone. You are losing like that, you kind of get used to this new version, but then now you lose that version too, as they slowly, then, after they're not being able to talk, then it's okay, well, now he can't get up from the chair or out of the bed by himself. And then eventually, but he, if you helped him, he could walk a little bit. And then eventually it was, no, now there's no walking. And so it's just this like, kind of like just brutal, like longest death ever when someone has dementia and you're losing that person. And so I wasn't living in Cleveland at the time. I was living in Seattle. And my mom would, give me updates and whatnot on how he was doing. And he was always like, super strong and tough guy. Like he was always an athlete. I got all my athletic stuff from him. And he was an iron worker, like, worked with his hands and was like super strong his whole life. And then he became this person who just like, he couldn't get up, so it's like complete change of, a person that you looked up to your entire life. And then, he wasn't like like a Brady Bunch dad or whatever. Like, I mean, he was tough on us, but like, that's just kind of like how it was when I grew up. But nonetheless, it was this process of losing this person. So when he finally passed, I had to then fly home from Seattle to Cleveland and be with my family. And of course, when I was working in clinic, in-person, hands-on healthcare, you get 3 bereavement days when you lose someone, and it has to be like the immediate family, of course, right? So, you're not allowed to grieve anyone else, but okay, that's a whole other thing. So thankfully, I guess, he happened to pass on like a Thursday. So I actually went to work half a day on Friday and then flew home Friday. And then was with my family all weekend. And I think I ended up leaving Cleveland on that Tuesday or whatever. And then I was back to work on Wednesday. So, there was like literally like there's no time to grieve, when you're going through the like just all the family stuff and the and I was raised Catholic. And so so you have a wake. And so, then there's like 2 viewing times for the wake. And, you have that whole thing. And that's like, okay, we got through that. And then, it's like, you're just trying to be strong for your mom and, and then the funeral and whatnot. And so it's like, it's kind of like in and out, and I go back to work and, I'm like, it's kind of whirlwind. So it hasn't even really like hit me yet, like all of this happened. And I went to work, and the first patient I saw that morning, you just kind of like in healthcare, you have to do this a lot anyway. You compartmentalize, right? Because you just have to move on because people tell you things and you're like, oh, okay, wow, that's awful. And let's do something else. And, so anyway, so my first patient, I bring her back into the room, and I noticed on her t-shirt was something about angels. And I just lost it. I just completely like started, and I had only seen this lady like one other time. So she doesn't even know me that well yet. And so I like just started crying and told her that I had just come back from my dad's funeral. And she was like, oh my God, and she just like, she was like, we don't have to even do anything today. If I'll go home or whatever. Like, she was like trying to help me and everything. And she didn't have to do that. And I just thought that was very sweet of her. And I was like, no, and like, if I was home, I just would be sitting there, just grieving, I guess, like you're supposed to. So I was like, no, I'm better if I stay busy, whatever. But I just thought it was kind of weird that the very first person that I see to treat had this like angel t-shirt on when I got there. And I was just like, oh, so maybe she was kind of like my little angel or something. I don't know. So that I could at least let it out a little bit so that I could continue working that day. But then, it was just like a couple of weeks of just kind of foggy, you go through the motions, you go to work, you do the things. But, I didn't want to do anything else. My boyfriend kept, wanting us, come on, let's go here, it'll cheer you up. And, let's go do that. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to be around people. I'm around people all day. Like I can't, that's not what I want. That's not, maybe for some people, like that's what they need. But for me, really, all I wanted to do is just be left alone and just be able to process, what happened. And then I think I did very, very slowly, but like, you guys were saying, like, things will back up on you, and you just like, every year, and I have to remember to do this. It's on my calendar, but I have to remember to like just take everything off my calendar. So like every year on August 2nd, or is it 1st? No, I can't remember because I flew home the next day. I have it on my calendar, and it's not even like a conscious thing, like, oh, today's going to be a terrible day, but I am kind of a hot mess like that whole day every year. And it's like you can't even put your finger on it. And then it's kind of like halfway through the day, and it's like, oh. So like, as much as you try to just keep going, and it's you can't hide from, I guess your subconscious mind or whatever. It's like, no, this is a day that you grieve and you remember, and even you remember the good stuff. It doesn't like, it doesn't necessarily make me cry, to think about it anymore. But you can't not think about it on that day. And so I just have to remember going forward, like, don't plan anything that day because my brain just like can't focus and just feel really off. And, just kind of like, I need to be by myself all day, kind of one of those things. So, you function, but, you just, that person never leaves your soul. You allow yourself that day, and, then you get back on in real life and you keep moving, but you're not ever done grieving. I don't think, not for someone like your dad, you know, so that's all I got.
I know exactly what that's like. I am in the process. My grandma has Alzheimer's. And I have never heard it put in oh that well, where it's like, oh, like I just got used to this level, and now we're at this level, and it's like all the work and all the rah-rah that I gave to like get psyched up to meet this person. It's like now I gotta do it again and again and again. And I did that just really resonated with me when you said that. And I'm sorry about what happened. And it's a hard loss, but it it makes loving them in that time. How do I phrase this? I don't know how to phrase this right. So much more of a choice, and it's kind of beautiful. It's like this is challenging. This is not easy. And you know what? You were here for me through all of my not easy parts. Like I remember my grandma sitting across the table from me, and I was like a 7-year-old hooligan, just like breaking rules and everything. And she'd sit across the table from me at 2 a.m. playing cards, and she'd be like, just trying to hash out like what's going on in your brain, kid. And I think that having the ability to be there when they're having a hard time, because I think so many times, you know, your parents or your grandparents might have it all together when they pass, and just to have this opportunity of vulnerability with my grandma, and I hope you had a similar thing. Um, Really made the love pure, in my opinion, because it was entirely voluntary. It was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a challenge. What's going on here?" But that really resonated with me, and I wanted to say that.
I'm sorry that you have to deal with that with your grandma. It's not, it's no fair, as they, little kids will say, it's not fair. But no, it's not. There's, I don't think there's a good way to lose anyone, but that's not a great way to lose someone who is very important to you in your life. So, um, I'm I wish you all the strength to get through the steps and the phases, and you know, hopefully it's not too awful.
It it's worth it. They loved us.
Yeah, I like that, David. Yeah, I like that. You know, Gina, how you said about sorry your dad and stuff. I'm sorry about that. I really am. My heart actually goes out to you and David, and just for anybody in general that has has lost someone. The one thing that really, really, really got me in life was when I found out that I was pregnant with my son. He was due on Christmas Day. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have me, Christmas baby, what have you. Everybody in my family said, what would be the odds if he came on the day grandma passed away? I said, nah, that's too early. It's too early. He came on the day she passed. December 8th is when she passed back in '04. And he came that day. I was like, no. I was actually getting up and getting ready to go to work and everything. Because I had worked all the way up to full term. And at that time, I was about 37 weeks. So I was like, okay, I got, 3 more weeks to go or whatever. I'm going to work until next week. And then I'm going to take off and then I'll be off for a while. No, he had other plans. He came on that day. That day. And when it's time for his birthday, it's kind of like a bittersweet in my family. Like we all want to come around him and he's a joy. He's a hoot. He is the like he has brought life back, for everybody. It was kind of that thing when she passed away, it was like sad and dark and like, man, she's gone. My son, he brought that back for everyone, especially my mom. She loves her grandchild. He can do no wrong, and I can see it in her eyes, like she's so happy to see him. But it was like, what's the odds of that happening? Like he was due on Christmas. And then for him to come on the 8th, I was like, wow, this is something. So yeah, it's one of those things. And, I look to him all the time. He's so strong and he just tends, to remind me of her. He's fearless. Of course, he's 10. He doesn't fear a lot. Um, he brought that back into our lives and stuff. And it's funny the other day he has a fracture now his arm and stuff, and we went to the hospital, and I really had a moment in the hospital because I was like, I used to work in this, and now I'm here with my child, and I started reminiscing about her so much, and I don't know why. Well, it was due to her her birthday was just February. She would have been, I can't remember like as far as this exact as far as age, whatever, but I was just actually speaking to my mom about her the day before, about how she passed and stuff like that. And then boom, he has, a fracture. So we have to go to the hospital. I was like, I'm overwhelmed. So I understand when you're like, it's like as far as those days where you're overwhelmed and you can't think. And I had that day. I was like, okay, I'm human. Like if I didn't think I was that day. I was looking at my son like I'm gonna have to lean on him. Like he's my support even though he has a fracture. So yeah, it's one of those things, it's just life. But yeah, that happened to us and our family. So he's our joy. So
Hope's arm gets better.
thank you. It is already. He woke up this morning, didn't wear the sling. That's another issue. But yeah.
You
We're
better
getting there.
get
He's
on him.
10.
He's
He's
got to
10.
heal right.
I did, David. I did. Had to be the
Good.
mom today, okay? I was back at it today. But yeah.
Did you say how old is he? He's 10?
Yes, but he acts like he's about 14, the way he talks and carries things. But he brings that light in our family. He does. Like we needed him, indeed. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
I don't know if you have any like beliefs in this area or not, Dee, but like, do you feel like your grandmother like sent him to be born that day or like had anything to do with that from a spiritual level?
Yes. My whole family actually thinks that. I'm starting to tear up now. But yes, our whole family does. Like when he was born, it was just like, I'm a mom and that's my baby now. And he came like it was like, here you go. I'm here. I'm still here, type deal. Like it came out of nowhere. Shock for him to come that early. So yeah, he is like he's who I needed in my life and we needed him in our family. Like he is the show for the family. Like they love to hear him talk and the things he has to say. He's such a historian about things. He can tell you about stuff I don't even know about. He was like, "You don't know that? You have a master's degree and don't know that?" I'm like, I don't know everything, and that's not what I specialize in, you know? But he's like her in a sense. Like she was real funny like that, and she would make a joke and stuff. So it's him every day that tends to, to remind me of her. Like he could say some of the wildest stuff, and I'm like, that's something that she probably would have said, you know? But yeah, I do. I do actually believe that. I do. I really do.
That's beautiful. I love that for you and your family and for him. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a connection he'll have to her forever.
Mm-hmm. And then what is so funny too, a cousin right after, so they're probably about 2 or 3 years apart. He also was born on the 8th of December. And it's actually the grandchild. So I'm the oldest grandchild. So he's probably like the fifth, fifth oldest. And he had a son, and his birthday is on the 8th as well of December. So I'm like, we have two. So yeah, it just kind of happened that way. I wish she was still here, and it's just like what Gina said, no fair. It wasn't, and that's how I felt. Like it was just not fair. Like she was not supposed to go, not now. Like but yeah, she's still here with us though. But yeah,
Yeah. I think I like that you all brought up the not fair aspect of loss, whatever the loss is. It's like as adults, we have the cognitive understanding that fairness isn't like doesn't really get dealt out the way that we would like for it to, and that doesn't matter within grief. It's like I don't know about for you all, but for me with my grief, be it related to like losing my dog, the loss of health from chronic illness, my career not being what I thought it would be, and me not being in the place I thought I'd be. I just have moments where it's almost like I'm a tantruming child, where I'm like that level of this isn't fair. Like, and I don't care what anyone has to say. I don't care how you try to reframe it. It just isn't fair. It's that black and white. And like, I need to tantrum about it. Um, which by the way, I think is really important as a therapist. Like, I encourage my clients to throw themselves pity parties and tantrum. I think that's I don't think that should stop with childhood. But it's just interesting how grief does that. Like it creates just such a strong like, no, I'm not accepting this. I don't wanna.
That's when I was treating patients, I would, you know, they, there's all kinds of, like you say, there's all kinds of losses. And patients would sometimes tell me, like, "Oh, I can't do this anymore, and I can't do that," and for whatever reason, whether it's an injury that maybe is taking a long time to heal, or they had surgery and they can't do this, that, and the other, or they have now a permanent something or another that they have to, learn how to live with or whatever. And I would tell them, on any particular day when they came in, if they were having a really hard time that day, I would say, you know what, have this day to just, life sucks and this sucks. And, just, you can hate this day and you could be sad and, go eat your ice cream and, whatever you need to do, just have that day. But tomorrow, pick yourself up and try to get back into your life and doing the things that you need to do. It's, you have that breakdown. You need to have that breakdown sometimes, but don't live there. Don't stay there, because that David had mentioned it a couple of times, you don't want to be stagnant there. But geez, we're human. I mean, you have to let yourself have the tantrum. You do. I think it's part of healing. And, again, this is just, obviously the other kind of therapy that I did, not your kind of therapy, but there's a fair amount of psychology involved in physical therapy, which you don't necessarily realize until you've been treating for 8 million years. But yeah, you have to have the day. You got to have the kicking and screaming tantrum day sometimes.
I definitely agree with that, because I feel like sometimes, like, one of the biggest parts of at least my reconciliation process is what part of this was justified, what part of this was unjustified. Because if it's justified, then I need to change. I need to do something differently. Okay, I'll take my lashings. But if it's unjustified, like, that's where I've always, and if I'm talking to friends or family or clients, whoever I'm working with, when they're working through, like, because sometimes when you're working through it, like, when you're like, it's not fair. Like, that can lead to a point of anger, I guess. And or a tantrum. And, like, that's, like, sometimes you should throw a tantrum. Sometimes it's flat out not fair. And sometimes you should scream to everyone until the cows come home that it's not fair. Because odds are most of them agree. And most of them didn't say a word about it. And, that's always how I felt about it, is, when you really, like, are reconciling and deciding, like, okay, this is the part that was really just flat out unfair. I'm going to take accountability for my input. This wasn't fair. That's a good temper tantrum, especially, like, when I work with, like, my clients. Sometimes, a lot of times when I'm working with people in the gym, I'll tend to get a lot of people who have frustration. And the one of the biggest things that I try to remind them is there's righteous frustration. Like, there is, like, sometimes you are right to be mad. Sometimes things are not fair. You should shake your fist. You should holler. You should be angry. And that's not the irrational response to what you're getting. Um, and so, yeah, I think, what you two said with, like, justification, take your day, throw your temper tantrum, because, like, sometimes you deserve a temper tantrum. And, if you let it out and nobody cares, so be it. But at least you let it out.
Yeah, I think that for Gina and David, you guys are so important, because I think movement is so necessary for processing grief and all of the emotions that accompany it. Like tantruming. Because tantruming doesn't just have to be like a yelling or like an exclaiming. It can be like movements with your body. Which since I work with a lot of chronically ill clients, I encourage them to move their bodies in a way that is safe for their body and not going to injure them. But, like, Gina, like, I started working with you after Ada passed away as a way to cope with her death, because I'm like, part of it was guilt from not exercising her as much as she needed to help prevent injury. And my chronic illness being the reason why I couldn't. So wanting to kind of build that up. Which speaks to what David was saying about, like, look at a situation and determine your role in it. And so I decided, like, that was guilt that is mine to carry. Like I'm not gonna beat myself up over it and like make myself feel like a horrible person, but not but sorry. And it's something I'd like to improve on. And also the more my body is able to move comfortably and safely, the better I'm able to process my grief, not just because I'm doing something that is dedicated towards what I wish I could have given Ada, but also it lets me process my grief because I don't just sit here stationary with all of the pain in my body. I'm doing something to get it out. And if we just let our grief and our anger and our sadness and depression sit in our bodies, like it turns into me, very chronically ill person. So it's like, yeah, that just came to mind with you guys with what David was saying.
I totally agree with you. I was always raised the truth will set you free. And there's the greatest liberation you can have is admitting I was wrong, admitting your role in it, and admitting that you messed up, and like, oh, actually, all these ramifications are my fault. And I feel like that that is that's what I like to focus on when I think about it.
That is something that when I'm doing work with clients who are either anticipating loss or are processing loss, again, like regardless of what kind of loss it is, it's like, is there any component of this that is related to like your values and what's important to you and what you would have liked to do differently? Because like a lot of times when you're grieving, people are very quick to shut it down from the like either you shouldn't be grieving or the it's not your fault. Like you shouldn't be feeling that way. But like I'm not saying you should be feeling that way, but I think shutting down any feeling with grief isn't helpful. I think all of them are worth exploring. Um, and I mean, I'm a parts therapist, so I'm very much of the opinion that every emotion is a part and every belief is a part, and the best thing we can do is turn towards it and see what it has to say. Because that's how we learn about ourselves and that's how we become better. It's kind of what you said, David. That I never really actually realized how big of a value that was of mine, David, until you said that phrase, the truth will set you free. I'm so big on accountability and so big on parsing apart like my role in my own suffering. Um, and just, yeah, I think it's, now I feel like I'm rambling, but there was a point in there somewhere.
No, no, yeah, I did the same thing just a second ago, so I'll come and save you the way I felt you saved me. um, uh, no, that's exactly what I was, alluding to, which is like it's actually just taking the responsibility will help you grieve better. Not better, but like more effectively. And I the resistance to that is I feel where people begin to develop a lot of their issues and a lot of these runaway coping mechanisms, for lack of a better word, because you're trying to fuel a facade instead of just admitting that I'm actually the culprit. And if you just admit you were the culprit, I always think about the Marcus Aurelius quote, which is the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And it's like, if it's oh, no, no, I lost my train of thought. Save me, Ollie, save me.
You were talking about Marcus Aurelius, and
Just before that, what was I saying?
I got stuck on Marcus Aurelius because I was trying to understand the quote you used because I'm not smart in that
Perfect. The
way.
truth will set you free.
Yes.
Meaning if you're dodging the accountability, like, oh, I want to get better. You put yourself on this, I'm grieving, I'm getting into this state where I'm beginning to feel, lack of a better word, sorry for myself, and I'm not coping healthily. It's like, well, you're resisting your role in the situation. And if you just accepted the fact that you are the problem and you address the fact that you are the problem, then you would get to better. but a lot of people aren't willing to have that concession of saying, actually, I'm part of this. Actually, maybe some of me needs to be a little mended, and some of my inputs and behavior patterns that I'm using. And you know, I feel like that is a part of the, whether it's grieving or building healthy coping mechanisms in general. That's the biggest thing, is if it's not rooted in an accountability of what I did wrong to contribute to the thing that I'm uncomfortable about, then everything I'm doing is like a facade, unless that is the central focus.
Yeah, I gotta tread lightly here because this is a touchy topic, but with my chronically ill patients and with the chronically ill population, and I'm speaking on this because I've experienced it myself. It is because so many of us, especially people who are assigned female at birth or present female or femme, don't get listened to by doctors. They spend decades looking for answers, um, while also being exhausted and in pain. Um, and so by the time you get to a provider who believes you and is giving you recommendations, it's very common to filter out stuff you were told by providers who negated your symptoms, such as like movement is very important for chronic illness. A lot of chronically ill people hate that recommendation. They're like, I don't want to move. Like that's causing me pain. But it's helping them understand, like, it's not just movement, it's helping you learn how to move. So Gina, like, for me, for a long time, got deconditioned because I got so stuck in the mindset. It was from grief. I used to be an athlete, like competitive soccer player, travel club. Like I was like an athlete. And then as I went into college and I stopped being as physically active, and then I got COVID a handful of times, my health has just tanked. So that's been a big point of grief. I never even really like identified as an athlete, if that makes sense. That wasn't the point, but it was the grief over loss of what my body could do. So not so much over the identity of athlete, but loss over like physical abilities. But I did reach a point where like I had consumed so much information about chronic illness trying to find a diagnosis for myself, understandably, because doctors weren't giving it to me. They kept being like, you're anxious. I wasn't. I have multiple genetic conditions that I didn't cause myself. Um, but I did, within that, you get so deep into the information and you learn from other chronically ill people, which is really powerful and helpful, and also can very quickly tip over into loss of hope, because a lot of the people who have a lot of really good information on these different illnesses are extremely disabled by them. And so my brain for a couple of years was in the place of, it's inevitable. I'm going to become bedbound. That like I'm done. Like I've got these really bad illnesses. I don't have the answers. I don't have the resources. Um, I'm done. That's it. I, and like I'm in my low 30s. And I mean, eh, being young doesn't prevent you from being chronically ill or sick. Like illness doesn't give a shit about age. It does not. It does not discriminate. Um, and still, it is hard to be in my low 30s and looking at many other people my age and even older than me who are so physically capable and get to go enjoy life. And I'm just sitting here on my couch every day. So essentially, like, my grief over my loss of capacity led to this cycle of, like, I'm stuck here. But then I realized one day, like, oh, wait a minute, there's options. Like, if I can find someone who can help me, like, just get to having baseline, relatively normal functioning, maybe there's hope. And I actually had a friend the other day who asked, like, hey, like, how's all your health stuff going? And I was like, actually, it's going pretty well. And she's like, oh, like, do you think that eventually you'll get to a point where you feel like normal-ish? And for the first time in years, I was like, I actually think I might. Like, that's crazy to say, but Gina, that's all you. And Anne, you guys have single-handedly restored my hope. But it's just kind of like I had to, it was really important for me to grieve the loss of my health. That was really important. And it reached a point where I was like steeping in it. And that became my sole identity was I am a sick person, which valid. I am a sick person. I am way more sick than your average person. I'm going to struggle in a lot of ways most people aren't. Um, that doesn't mean my life's over. No, I know that's not the case for every chronically ill person because some chronically ill people are way more chronically ill than I am, and like they literally have done everything and they're at the best they're ever gonna get. So like that's completely valid, and it's also completely valid to be like me where there is possibility to get better but still be stuck because it's hard not to get stuck when you have a healthcare system that's against you. Um, anyway, but all of that is just to say like David, I liked your point about like at some point stepping outside of the grief cycle and like just the emotions that go on there and trying to figure out like, is there something I can do different here? Um, and sometimes you don't realize there is until you get a new bit of information and you're like, hey, now I have power and control.
So we were talking about everybody's throwing out quotes. One of my favorite one is the only way out is through, which I think is Robert Frost, who I also love since like, I don't even know, like third grade or something when we had to do poems or something in school. But I think David was talking about it, owning your part. And that was something that I had to do after I got divorced. I was not a very healthy person. I was living my life, but I wasn't doing it in healthy ways. I was not coping in very healthy ways. And I reverted to some behaviors that I had used in the past when I wasn't being very healthy. But at some point, and I don't know if I think I read something that said, you know what, you have to forgive yourself for not for things not working out the way you thought, and for, you being human, and you made mistakes, and, not letting yourself off the hook, but like acknowledging like, okay, that I played a part in this, but it's not going to ruin my life. And you have to kind of like let yourself off the hook and, okay, I'm a human being, and sometimes you make, mistakes, and it doesn't have to define you. And so you grieve what you thought was going to happen, because I think most people get married and you think you're going to be married forever, right? And so you do grieve that, whether it's your choice or not, to if you wanted it to end or not. But then you have to like, you have to own that, okay, yeah, I played a part in this, and you grieve it, and you accept what you did, and, your part, and then you have to move on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Damn this mute button. No, I just, because David, you said something, and I was like, yeah, that is totally what I had to do after I got divorced, because I was just doing all this unhealthy stuff. And I was just like, I realized it was just me trying, like running away from like the pain of the ending, and you're not really accepting, like, like you said, you have to accept your part, and then that helps you get over it. And it does.
Yeah, and especially keeping it like grief related, like, because like it manifests in so many different ways. Some people, take to food for comfort. Some people, take to, they might become a little sedentary. Some people, whatever option that they are picking to grieve, maybe a unsustainable mechanism they're picking to grieve. You can replace that with a good thing and still grieve. Like that was it's always the part that I never understood when I work with some people and talk with some people is I'm always, hey, like I totally understand that you are set in your ways and you're stuck and you don't want to move at all, but like have you ever tried art? Like to grieve? Have you ever done a painting when you're emotional? And I don't know if this is comes from how I was raised, but so many people will are so quick to give in to the worst of their vices the second they grieve, and they kind of just pull out their excuses for why it's okay. And it's like, well, yes, I'm not saying that it's not that I don't get it. I'm just saying like our society has pitched us in a way to where like the arts aren't even an option. Like athleticism was never a coping mechanism given to like half the kids, and I that's the biggest thing that I like to focus is like, I did develop very unhealthy coping mechanisms when I was grieving. And my way getting through it wasn't to sit in a void of time and space with nothing to do. It was to do something that was good for me that also, allowed me to experience the emotion I was feeling, whether that's art, whether that's, work or whatever.
David, did you mean to mute yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I finished.
Okay. Just
I've
wanted to
been
make sure.
nervous because I got I got a shaky desk and I don't want it to jingle jangle while someone's talking.
You're good. I have an answer for why people do that. It's avoidance. It's because if you use art, if you move your body, all of those are going to bring the emotions to the surface more quickly, which means you have to face them. But drinking, vaping, like having a ton of sex that you don't actually really want to have, because having a ton of sex isn't a problem, but like if you aren't actually wanting to have a ton of sex and you're doing it just because you're grieving, you're all of it is in the service of avoiding. That's what it is, and you're not actually grieving, and you might convince yourself you are, and then that's where I come in, where I kind of help people parse through, like, all right, what parts are stepping in the way of you being able to move through this? Why? What are they scared of? And then usually within that we find, oh, well, I feel ashamed or I feel guilty or it's the grief's going to swallow me whole or we live in the United States where emotions are taboo, or it's capitalism and I have to go to work so I don't have time to grieve. Don't even get me started on the systems that are present in our country that prevent us from being able to have normal human emotions. But yeah, no, I mean it's really hard to. I'd say most people are not in a position to be able to choose how they cope. They just go in whatever direction they were conditioned, which, at least within the United States, not typically healthy. See, I use the word, but helpful. Not usually in the service of actually processing the grief or helping them integrate it and consolidate it with their understanding of themselves in the world. Yeah. You guys are all staying silent. Is that all of the thoughts that are on grief? Which is fine. It's okay if nobody has anything else to say, but I just want to check in.
So I have that awesome gene where I'll sit here and talk for 7 hours, which I'm sure
Same.
nobody wants to endure. I was being quiet because I didn't want to blabber mouth, but now guilty as charged. Totally forgot whatever we were talking about 30 seconds ago. I have a mind that and then like my after recall is amazing. I don't know how to describe it. Like I could tell somebody every word I said 20 minutes from now. But if you ask me what we talked about 30 seconds ago, no.
Delayed processing is the phrase you're looking for.
I have that.
And delayed recall.
I do.
It's not uncommon for concussions.
I figured between the concussions and every other thing that everything.
I have had a lot of concussions. So my brain works very similarly, where like I don't even know what I was talking about before you started talking. No clue. It's gone.
It
But
gets
in
me
like
into
20 minutes I'll know.
it gets me into hot water every time I get into a conversation because I'm like I'm literally in the middle of talking and I've lost the script, y'all. I don't know what we're doing.
I get it. I really do. As a therapist, it shows up in sessions and I just have to be like, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I was saying. Like they're like, it's fine. But yeah, Dee or Gina, did you guys have anything else like that felt relevant or important to add either to what we were saying or just related to grief?
Um, I just want to thank you for giving, like, as far as your thoughts and with your specialty. I mean, it's helped me to know I am okay. That does happen. And just that I feel as though as I age and go through life, of course, experience, I'm able to handle things a lot better in general. And when it can be, I know it can look like all sorts of ways with others. Um, but I'm just not knowing. I'm learning how to be patient with myself and kind to myself when it comes to, to grieving and not allow society to, to dictate how they think I should grieve. And just surround myself around a good support system when I do have to grieve or go through something, whether that is if, I lost someone, a past, or like, Gina was saying, a divorce. I can say that feels like, like you lost someone too. I went through that. And still kind of going through that, like as far as the motions of things. I'm okay, I'm good, I'm better. But I think we tend to lie and just say, yeah, we're good, and you're probably not good. Um, I've had to learn, actually stop doing that. It's like if I'm having a bad day, I'm just having a bad day. I'll just put you on alert. Hey, I'm not having a good day today, because I'm going through this right now. So, yeah, Gina, I can relate to that part, the divorce part. But I'm good now. I'm not where I was. I'll say that. I'm not where I was. And yeah, when it comes to relationships and stuff, sometimes you gain, sometimes you lose, or it's a little bit of both. I've just learned that some people may only serve a purpose in your life for that moment in time. And it's okay if you don't have a long-term friendship, because I think I was on a lot of time. That's my friend. That has to be my friend. No, they don't have to be your friend forever. It's okay. It's okay. Life goes on. It's okay. You don't have to be rude to the person or whatever. Maybe things just kind of end quietly as well too. So yeah, that's all I have to say. But thank you.
Thank you, Dee. And thank you, Al. And thank you, David. Um, Ali touched on it when we very first started and talked about how there are so many different ways in our lives that we do grieve for different reasons, different kinds of losses. It's not always a person or a marriage or a lifelong goal or whatever. It's sometimes it's yourself. You grieve a previous version of yourself, and yeah, like you said, like it's I something that I've learned from my many years of treating patients and just living life is that what it's okay to be human because we're human and um, you how you as you get older you tend to learn how to handle things better but yeah um, now I don't remember what I was talking about. And this is from, Yes, COVID 3 times, and yes, a concussion. So, um, yeah, midlife hormones. My brain is mush. So I don't remember where I was going with that, but I'm grateful for this conversation, and to know just real people. You know, you guys you're all good peeps. So thank you.
Thank you guys. We all have the Dory gene.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being willing to show up today and talk about this. It's like I said, it's one of my favorite topics to discuss, frankly, because it is one of the hardest emotions to manage. And I think every single person has some amount of grief in their life. So I think knowing that there are people out there talking about it just makes it a little bit less lonely. So yeah, thank you all.